Hello and good evening, everybody. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. On the big story tonight, opposition coalition NASA made good their threat to have nationwide demonstrations every Monday and Friday. Just the fourth day after the failed talks with the IEBC, and different stakeholders continue to register their concerns over the ongoing protests. The Kenya Private Sector Alliance decries the fall in profits owing to the rising political uncertainty. Meanwhile, the National Super Alliance is not relenting. But what does the business community say? We will be speaking to them in just a moment on the show. Well, so tonight, we will be speaking live in studio to Roslyn Akombe. That's Dr. Roslyn Akombe, who's the IEBC Commissioner. She will shed some light on the IEBC's preparedness ahead of the fresh presidential elections, which is now just 23 days away. We also have Lee Karuri, who's the Kenya Private Sector Alliance trustee. He will be highlighting some of the concerns that the business community has amidst the political impasse. We shall also then draw insights from the man of the moment, that's the acting cabinet secretary in charge of security, Dr. Fred Matiang'i. Later in the program, we shall hear what the international community has to say about the whole situation. That's what we have for you on the show tonight. But first, we start off with our lead reporter here on the show, Sophia Wanuna, who's joining me from the city center of Nairobi. Sophia, good evening. It's been an interesting day. The protests continuing again for a second week. Tell us what's been happening in the country and why you spoke to the Cabinet Secretary, Acting Cabinet Secretary for Interior as well as Education today.
Good evening to you, Yvonne. What a day. Protests in various parts of the country. Anti-IEBC protest organized by the National Super Alliance, but also the self-proclaimed Nairobi business community as well, coming out in parts of Nairobi as well to counter those protests. And as you rightfully mentioned, the man of the moment who holds two crucial dockets, running them in this month, where they're coinciding in a very significant fashion, being able to get an exclusive interview with him, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, not only the Education Cabinet Secretary. We just have the national examinations around the corner, around the country, as well as the acting Interior CS. And we're talking about this demonstration, security, a significant issue. We're talking about elections. That's also one of the big concerns, and one of those areas that as well usually that needs a lot of keenness and preparations around the same. So we managed to catch up with him today. And Yvonne began by speaking to him around those protests that were witnessed at the University of Nairobi last week, but more so the manner in which the security forces countered the protest. We saw clips of them at the university, around the halls of premises for the students, lobbing tear gas in there, getting them to frog march, and a lot of hue and cry following the manner in which the officers dealt with the students, some of whom had not even gone out to protest. So he'd just come from a meeting with the stakeholders, and he talked to us about who he met before our interview on this particular protest and what emerged from the same. Let's listen.
I have just come from a meeting with the Inspector General of Police, Mr. Macharia Ancheru of the Independent Police Oversight Authority, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Nairobi, 3 student leaders and members of the Student Council at the University of Nairobi, and the Deputy Inspector General of Police. We've spent time appraising what happened at the University of Nairobi last week. And as I say all the time, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, because we have institutions in this country so that we govern ourselves in an orderly manner. And there is an institution called IPOA whose responsibility it is to play the civilian oversight role over the police. Right. And IPOA is seized of this matter and they are investigating it. But we appraise the facts. The reason why we had a round table and all the critical players were present because the Inspector General of Police and his deputies are there. IPOA is present, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Nairobi and his deputy in charge of student affairs, the student leaders and ourselves from the security sector, myself and the PS. It's so that we all understand where we are at with the issue. And we all accepted one thing, that what we are seeing, the footage we are seeing and the videos we are seeing are grossly exaggerated, number one. Number two, yes, and I would not like to deny that the police may have gained entry into the University of Nairobi. It wasn't unlawful because police can and were invited in the University of Nairobi. Then 3, now to describe and analyze their entry and what happened at that point in time, I don't want to prejudice the actions of IPOA because they are taking statements from students and from the victims and leaders of the University of Nairobi. We all agreed that within the next 7 days, Mr. Macharia Njeru will be done with the investigation. He will have a report and he will make the report public. And we all agreed that we'll go the direction the report takes us. If it points to individual culpability on the part of some police officers, we will act according to the law because we have a law that guides all of us. The police have got standing orders and ways in which they are supposed to act. I have to keep reminding us all the time on this issue that the difference between us and any other societies that do not have institutions is that we are blessed to have constitutional institutions in place. Our actions, our responses, and what we are supposed to do in circumstances such as those is very clearly outlined and provided for in the law. Yeah. As soon as we get the report from IPOA, we will act, and we will act firmly on the matter. At the moment, I don't want to engage in a wild goose chase, you know, where I comment generally, like every off-handed person is commenting on the issue without looking at the facts. Yeah. I pointed out, for example, that by and large, the videos we are seeing on social media is a gross exaggeration of what actually took place. But I'm not excusing
what do you mean gross exaggeration? That they're fake, they're not true?
Some of the videos have been analyzed, they are not true. And I don't want to preempt what Mr. Njeru is going to talk about. Yeah. In fact, he has a much stronger team that analyzes such information than we do ourselves at the Ministry of Interior. Yeah. So I am also eagerly waiting for his report.
However, we saw the Inspector General of Police last evening at least concede that some of the actions they took in as far as we saw indiscriminate beatings. You've talked about them gaining entry into the university, students being made to frog march, and he talked about this events allowing for that situation to be calmed at the time, that it worked to calm the situation at the university. So to that extent, he's conceding that there were these actual, incidences that took place concerning the students and that the police were in charge of the same happening.
Look, as I said, I am always best counseled to be very careful, knowing as I do, and I must always remember that whatever I say and whatever I do, when at the moment I'm in charge of security, is very important. I cannot begin to describe what happened and go into the details of what happened and at the same time say I'm waiting for a report from IPOA. Okay. So let's all get the report from IPOA. The law is very clear on what I should do myself as Minister for Interior. The law is very clear on what the Inspector General of Police should do. Once we get the report, we will act. The report will describe to us what happened. Yeah. We will know what ought not to have happened in that process, in which case crimes will be described. If there are any crimes that took place, excesses will be described in case there are any excesses that happened at that point. And then we will act that way. Yeah. I would like to plead, as I always do, that we're not going to be an ordered society if every day all of us have an opinion about something, but we pass judgment before we examine what the facts are and so on. Okay. That's what the framers of our Constitution were keen to ensure, that in addition to having a national police service, you need to have an independent civilian police oversight authority, so that they come in as independent people and they look into what happened and they give us an analysis and conclusions on what we need to do. All I can pledge at this point in time is that we will go the direction the report points us to. If the report points us to, as I said, culpability on the part of individual police officers, we will act. If the report points us to excesses having occurred, we will pursue them.
Yeah.
Now, that was definitely a wide-ranging interview. Sophia Wanuna is still with me. Sophia, you talked to him about the incident at the University of Nairobi, but also about general security when it comes to the anti-IEBC protests that we have seen from NASA and general security during this election period. What did he have to say about that?
Yes, Yvonne, we took him to task on that as well, and he dismissed as baseless allegations that we've heard from the National Super Alliance and their supporters, alleging that police have exhibited heavy-handedness in dispersing their supporters when they come out to protest, as opposed to when we see Jubilee supporters come out. But he also talked about the repeat October 26th presidential election is just 23 days away, in as far as security preparations as he mans that. And of course, the examinations as well are around the corner. Let's watch what he had to say.
You know, as usual, I level with the people of Kenya. I am a honest public servant, and I speak it as it is. I don't engage in public relations in my work. And therefore, I will tell you this. This banding of claims and allegations and pettiness around the work of the security sector must come to an end. It's a cultural issue in this country. Some of it very shameful, really, as it were. I am not aware, and it is not true, that the police have treated one political group better than another one. It is not true that the police have used excessive force on supporters of one political group. The implementation and the responsibility the security sector has to keep law and order is blind to creed, to political affiliation, to status, to ethnic affiliation, and so on and so forth. How on earth, just tell me, if you are a police officer patrolling the streets of Nairobi, how will you tell a supporter of Jubilee from a supporter of NASA if people are throwing stones and breaking windscreens across the road? How do they look like? What's the difference between the two of them?
With due respect, CS.
Let me tell you, let me complete this.
Yeah.
I'm seated here and speaking on this matter with a measure of, but you know, let me be frank with you.
Right.
I'm honestly sick and tired of this pettiness. Before the elections on 8th of August, we were told how we were going to deploy the army, you know, in certain parts of the country on the elections. One morning I woke up and I was told about how we have deployed 42 police officers at IEBC. I asked the CEO of the IEBC to publish the list of staffers at IEBC. Those who are making those claims did not pick out the police officers from that list. I was told about how we were going to over-police certain parts of the country during the elections so that we can intimidate voters. I was told about how the police were involved in all manner of crimes and so on to facilitate the election in support of one group. Nothing of that sort happened throughout. And now I'm hearing these new allegations. Oh, you know, for us NASA supporters, if we go out and demonstrate, we are beaten. And if Jubilee supporters go out and demonstrate, they are escorted and hugged and welcomed. I mean, it's plain nonsense. Let me just put it
May I
that
give
way.
an example of a scenario I witnessed being at the Supreme Court, covering it for a period of a week. There was a cordon around the Supreme Court, and so NASA supporters at the time were not allowed to come in, even within the precincts of the Supreme Court. But on this particular day where Jubilee supporters came and they said they were dressed as such and indicated they were, and they were chanting against the Supreme Court after the ruling, they were at the gates, violently shaking them, taunting the officers who stood by with no action being taken. It was later that day that the Chief Justice, who's also the chairman of the Judicial Service Commission, issued a statement and even called out the Inspector General of Police, saying that we have called for more protection because of these kind of incidences, but nothing had happened. So in that instance, do you see where those who would make these comments are coming from?
That is your rendition of the facts as you saw them, and the rendition of someone's perspective as they saw it.
Right.
There is nothing, and I can tell you this, those are the kind of excuses that I keep hearing, you know, from all manner of people who don't understand how. I mean, you have seen when Jubilee politicians have committed crimes where it's related to hate speech, they have been arrested. You have seen NASA politicians when they have committed crimes related to hate speech, they have been arrested.
Right.
We have to understand one thing. When all is said and done, law and order institutions in our country, like the police department, serve all of us, and we are best advised to respect them and try to encourage them and support them. They are there for our common good.
Okay.
This constant, and as I said, it's a culture that we've had over the years. You know, this culture we've had over the years where we demonize the police, we come up and say anything we want to feel like about the police and so on. Those men and women are our brothers and sisters. When we are sleeping at night, and the reason why we drive up and down in this country comfortably is because they are on duty taking care of us. Many of them make sacrifices some of us cannot even begin to imagine for our security and for our sake. It's time we acted patriotically and looked at the police as part of our community and began to work with them to improve areas where they need to improve and to strengthen them. We are not saying that we have angels in the police force. We don't have any within the population either.
Right, and of course, there was also the big concern that came out as to the cross-protesting and what would that mean for security in the capital, Nairobi. Sophia, I know you also asked him about the Nairobi business community who have come out to say that they will be counter-protesting and protecting their property. Does he have plans to make sure that the two groups are able to protest peacefully and that there won't be a clash and that there'll be adequate security?
Yvonne, the CS says it's very much in order for the Nairobi business community, as they call themselves, to come out and protest to protect their property and businesses, as they have said before in press conferences, and also described their very clear mandate as officers in light of this protest, even when they come face to face. Let's listen to the CS.
It's more important than my rights. In other words, you see what you're asking us to do, again, which is just shocking to me, it's characteristic of our society, is you're asking me to privilege one group's rights over the other group. The Constitution protects all of us equally and allows us freedoms equally without discrimination. Just as the NASA supporters have a right to demonstrate, the Nairobi business people also have a right to express themselves. So why would you want me to prefect the behavior of the Nairobi business people and you don't want me to prefect the behavior?
How does a protest work to protect a business? Because then what one would argue, that is a situation that would degenerate very quickly when you have two protesters out to...
That's not my responsibility. My responsibility comes in when people notify the police and say, tomorrow we are going to demonstrate. And another group notifies the police and says, we hear there's a demonstration and we will act to demonstrate to protect our business. We will come in when law and order is preached, because both groups need to understand the law clearly and what it prescribes. So, I mean, just imagine how ridiculous it would be for a government to stand up and say, you are right to demonstrate, you go and demonstrate. You don't have any right to protect yourselves, you stay at home. It's just... I mean, indescribable nonsense. I mean, how would you live like that?
All right, that is what he's calling indescribable nonsense, but offering protection for all those that want to protest, be it NASA, the Nairobi business community, as they call themselves. That is just a small part of a wide-ranging conversation that Sophia Wanuna had with the acting Cabinet Secretary for Interior and also the Cabinet Secretary for Education. It'll be airing at some point. Sophia, if you could just in 30 seconds give us a brief of a wide range of the other issues you discussed with the CS?
Yes, Yvonne, we touched, of course, as well on the withdrawal or scaling down of security that was attached to the former Prime Minister as well as former Vice President. He talked about that, what occasioned that scaling down, why it's important, and why people should not read politics into that. We also talked about the forthcoming examinations. He's a CS manning these two ministries at this crucial time. Last year, we saw a very hands-on CS when it came to the administration of the exams. Will we see that this time around, seeing as he also has security to manage? So he talked about that as well. And the question of Al-Shabaab and terror, and you remember the late PS Maui, who just recently succumbed to a terror attack within Kenyan soil, putting him to task on all of these other efforts, KDF in Somalia. Of course, there is the Boni operations that's ongoing, and the curfews. Is it that Kenya is losing this war on terror? So in as far as his role as Interior CS, he commented on that as well. So Yvonne, our viewers can catch it right here on KTN News later.
Yes, absolutely. Sophia Wanuna, thank you very much, our lead reporter here on The Big Story, for being out there and keeping tabs on The Big Story tonight, which is all about the protests by NASA, the anti-IEBC IEBC protests, the concerns by the business community, and just how prepared this country is for that repeat presidential poll that is now just 23 days away. We've heard from the Cabinet Secretary, who's manning both Interior and Education. Next, here on The Big Story, we will be speaking a little bit more about that. We will hear from the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. Lee Karuri, who's a trustee there, will be speaking about their specific concerns. We will be speaking about that, as well as what he thinks about the politicking and campaign season. And as well, the other person in the spotlight right now is she and her team, of course, is Dr. Roslyn Akombe, who's commissioner at the IEBC. We'll be speaking to her about preps for this election amidst the protests, amidst amendments to the electoral law. All of that is next here on The Big Story.